about the Patrick and Misty show. They were really out in the community, spreading the word, whether you wanted to hear from them or not. But I really was just so impressed by the number of surveys that were completed, over 7,000, available in 7 languages. And I like that the focus groups really reached out to marginalized and underrepresented communities so that everyone had a chance to give input, and people do care. A survey of hundreds of library staff. So we just thank you for everyone for participating. I do want to just share and remind people that feedback from today's meeting and other public comment opportunities this summer will be incorporated into the library master plan. So if you haven't had a chance to give feedback or weigh in, it's not too late. Also, a video of the meeting today will be posted on the city's YouTube channel. So if you had friends that couldn't get away from during the lunch hour, there will be an opportunity to view this meeting. So really excited. Thank you, Patrick, to you and the foundation for all of your efforts. All right, we're going to go to the Misty's turn now, our consent agenda, report on library construction projects. Misty.
Hi there. First, I want to apologize. I am not going to turn my camera on. I have been recovering from surgery, so there is absolutely nothing that you want to see here. But I do want to turn it over to Raul Godinho, who is Deputy Director for Library Operations, and let him fill you in on construction.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everyone. A couple updates regarding CIP. The Pacific Highlands Ranch Branch Library, this project was bid, and the due date was on April 8th. And the city is currently in the process of formally awarding the project to the lowest responsible bidder. That award process is currently with the city's engineering and capital project department, and in the contracting division. More information to come, but it looks like we're going to be close to groundbreaking in the fall of this year. The Scripps Miramar Ranch Library parking lot expansion is the other update. This project is completely done with or is completely in design phase now, and is currently with the Development Services Department's plan check for review. The building permit for this has been issued, and the environmental review has also been approved. Those are the updates for CIP. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Raul. Thank you for filling in for Misty. And you know that Misty would never even miss a meeting. Even if she were in the middle of surgery, I think she'd find a way to join us. So heal fast, Misty. I'm glad you're here, and thank you, Raul, for that. Are there any other reports or updates from the library director, Misty, either from you or from Raul? Or if not, we can move forward to the presentation of the master plan. But anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, the only other thing that I just want to add, and like I said, I want to give as much time to the presentation as possible, is just to give you a little update on the budget. And as we all know, the budget to get restored to the library, and can absolutely echo what Patrick and Joan and Wendy have said about advocacy and how important it is, and just how floored I am every year of the support that we have for the library system. We are working on our reopening plan in conjunction with the staffing adds. We have a lot of work to do this year, so we will be changing over the hourly positions into benefited positions. So we have about 175 people to hire this year. It's going to be a big task for us. But in the meantime, we're working on getting all locations reopened as quickly as we can, with even minimal hours, and trying to make that happen. So we actually have a meeting with our union, our represented employee organization tomorrow, to start discussing that and looking at what's next. We've made some changes, letting people pick up their own holds, and and eliminating the quarantine times, some minimal changes, but we want to get back to where people can actually be in the building and browse. And so that's the next step for us, but we will keep you posted. And that's really all I have, unless Raul or Bob has anything to add. I'm a little out of the loop, which is very disconcerting for me, but I am, have started checking emails again this week, so I will get back with it. But I just want to say publicly thank you to Raul and Bob for holding down the fort. You've done an amazing job and really just let me rest and decompress and not have to worry about the library. So thank you to both of you.
Well,
Problem.
I just want to call out Raul because he's been doing a heck of a job. And Misty, we miss you, but we're glad that you're getting better and we want you to rest. And that's the goal, right? We need you back 100%. So don't push yourself too hard. As Misty said, we're trying to reopen with more services, and we're meeting tomorrow with HR and the union to discuss some of those things. And we're also looking at staffing at the different branches to possibly open more locations. So that's all I've got.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Raul, anything
Okay.
else to add?
No further updates. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bob, Missy.
Thank you for those great updates. Again, just really kudos to the library staff. I know for the public, and we are all users of the library, we all want our libraries to be open sooner than later. And I think one thing that I can share from leading this commission for so many years is to really appreciate the hard work and what it really takes to open a library safely and with incredible programming, and that is fair to the employees and is wonderful to the community that uses it. So thank you for all of those long hours eating, living, and breathing the library. To all of the library staff, I just wanted to acknowledge all of you. All right, well, it is that very exciting time. I think many of you were with us, over a year ago, December, when we first got to hear some tidbits about the master plan at the December commission meeting. And I'm just so excited to bring Group 4, Carson Block Consulting, Carson and Jill Ayers to make this presentation. It has been such a long time, but such an exciting process. And if you aren't tired of hearing about the library master plan, just so you know, it's the San Diego Public Library, the foundation, in collaboration with the mayor and the city council and the Friends and the commission. And it's really about creating a long-range vision and strategy. So it's exciting for the library, technology and program investments. And we're getting out of the 80s, we're moving forward. So let me tell you a little bit about our incredible leaders that we have joining us today. And this is just really fun. If you haven't had a chance to meet Carson, I have to read his brief bio because it's really fun. So Carson Block has led and loved library technology efforts for more than 25 years, which is hard to believe because he doesn't look that old. Okay, he's been called a geek who speaks English. That's a compliment. And occasionally compared to Ferris Bueller and Calvin and Hobbes. Okay, love the hair. Carson is dead serious about essential and positive community impacts of libraries and focuses his consulting practice on helping libraries increase their capacity to serve patrons. He has served in leadership positions in ALA, ASCLA, Colorado, PLA, and others, and evangelizes libraries. I love that. He is also an author. He's a famous guy of library information systems with Joe Matthews, and also managing library technology. That's the short bio. Also, we're really pleased to have Jill Ayers. She is a senior associate with G4, and she works with libraries nationwide, which is really exciting, from Chula Vista to Cincinnati, to envision, plan, and build facilities that support modern service and celebrate their communities. And we talk a lot about, that libraries are more than just books, right? They're resource centers, they're community centers, they're after school. It's all about lifelong learning. So Jill is just passionate about this. In addition to her work with us, the San Diego Public Library, she is also collaborating on the design of new and revitalized libraries in Kentucky, Washington, and Ohio. I dare say San Diego is the most fun place to work. Nothing against those places, but she has presented before the California Library Association, the Public Library Association, and Environmental Design Research Association. Thank you both for joining us. Drum roll, please. Carson and Jill, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I will again just refresh folks that if commissioners have questions during the presentation, please either raise your hand or do the raise hand function, and we will open it up to questions to everyone via the chat. You may put your questions in the chat, and moderator Gudinho will help manage that towards the end of the presentation. All right, please begin.
All right. Well, thank you, Wendy, for that lovely introduction. As you say, libraries are about more than just books. And they're about more than just buildings, even though I'm an architect, and they're about more than technology, even though that's what Carson does. What libraries are really about is the community. And that is what we've tried to keep at the forefront of this process all the way through, because that is what makes the library unique and what will make this plan the right one for San Diego. As you mentioned, we were last in front of you in person in December of 2019. At that point, we brought you what we were calling our plan-to-plan phase, an examination of the context in which we would launch the plan in earnest. We did launch the plan in earnest in February 2020, where we thought this would be about 12 months long, and then, delays happened. So here we are, but we have been marching forward steadily. The purpose of this phase one, what we're calling the library system plan, was to establish the vision and the principles for the library at a system level. So we're not yet getting into things like specific recommendations for specific locations, specific branches, but putting together the framework that will help guide the city and the library in moving forward with all aspects of its network. We've been working with a variety of different groups. One is what we call our library staff team, with representatives of different parts of the library. We've had our steering committee, where Joan and others in the room with us today have been part of that, and it's good to see you all again too. We did a survey for library staff last fall, and out of more than 700 staff total, I think we got responses from more than half. Wonderful, rich responses about all things that they love about the library and the community. We've been having coordination meetings with the city planning department, which is working on the developer impact fees program. So we've spent a lot of time talking with various people. On the topic of the library staff survey quickly, just so much pride in the San Diego community and in the library and in the staff. One of the things that struck me in it was how long a lot of the staff have been with the San Diego Public Library. I mean, people have been here for 20, 30 years, and that tells me a lot about the quality of the organization and what a great place it is to work and how meaningful the work is. So kudos to that. Lots of discussion about resources. It was a time of uncertainty last fall, so that some of that is to be expected, but lots of conversation and comments as well about diversity, equity, and inclusion generally, equity of access to resources, equity of access to services, and to space. So that was a big theme that the staff set early. The community survey, as was mentioned, we got more than 7,000 responses. It's important to note here that this was what's called a convenience survey. This was not setting out to be a representative, statistically significant survey. This was really more an opportunity to ask the community about what it thinks of the community generally, what it needs, what the goals are. I mean, a little bit about library use, but more about the community. Again, like a high level of real pride in San Diego and lots of love for the library in the community survey. We're still going through it. The stacks of paper surveys and all the work that the library did and the foundation did to get the participation and enter the data into the database. We're still working on it. One of the first questions we asked was, what do you love about where you live? And there were all kinds of wonderful answers. I love everything. I love the ocean. I love my community. And the next question we asked was, what would you change about where you live? And we weren't specific about whether we meant their block or the planet or anywhere in between. But a lot of people just said nothing. Like, there's nothing I would change about where I live. So again, like, what a wonderful place San Diego is. Other issues came up, and we're still working through those, but big categories. We also, because it was a convenient survey and it was open to anyone, wanted to make sure that we heard from a diverse representation of the community. In convenient surveys, we often see sort of a narrow slice of the community that's very, very well represented in our respondent sample. So the Nonprofit Institute, Dr. Tessa Tinkler led the focus group efforts, 15 with a variety of people, age groups, BIPOC communities, military, people who are in transitional housing, who have been without housing. So wonderful. We're still working through that too. But a few of the things that she shared that are coming out of that analysis are, people really appreciate the library. I remember her telling us about someone who was in the transitional housing group, talking about how wonderful it was to feel so welcome at the library all the time, to be treated like a human being and a member of the community just like anyone else. Lots of love for programming and cultural events. There is a perception that some of the libraries are small and don't have as much as some of the others, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation, but that is something that is on the community's mind. And thinking about the library of the future, more about that equity of distribution of resources, not necessarily equal resources, but giving each community the resources it needs to meet the needs and have the impact that the library wants to have. More hours, more awareness, all kinds of things. So this, I think, did we have any questions on this section before we move on? We're just going to pause. Hearing none, I shall roll forward.
No questions yet.
Carson.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you, and thank you. Since we can't see the questions, I appreciate the cue. It's good to know. So San Diego Public Library, no surprise to anyone here, is a highly performing library. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we look at to tag that, because one of the realities is that great libraries are hyper-local. And even though on the outside it looks like libraries do the same things, public libraries, the actual mix of services and focus and priorities really are customized to the community. And the big message from this is that the library is really doing a good job at listening to the community and responding to that. Mostly because the staff is talented, engaged, passionate. This came through in the staff survey over and over and over again as a theme, even as people were talking about things that were difficult to talk about, things that they'd like to change in the organization. There was still a big commitment to staff as to the customers and to each other and to the library. Next slide, please. The other thing that we look at is the number of innovative services, and we're going to talk a little bit about more of this in a moment, because what better time to practice your innovation skills, your sharpness in innovation, than during a crisis. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about that. So this was put to the test, especially during COVID, but the skill set existed before that through all the things that the library was doing. The Idea Labs, of course, being one of the most more organized efforts, but there were so many diverse efforts throughout, and this was also recognized by the community, just the staff's commitment to innovation and continuing to improve. Next slide, please. The dedicated customer base, again, came up over and over again through this. San Diegans love the library and love the services that are available there. The fact that it exists is a big deal. No matter what socioeconomic group that we talk to, the library services were very valued, and everyone was vocal about that. And that's very helpful. We don't always see that sort of direct feedback. Next slide, please. The other thing that marks a high-performing library is there's not a lot of libraries that you would consider flush with cash, right? You know, that's just not a thing that goes along with public libraries. And so San Diego has been especially good at working around some of the challenges in terms of limited resources and funding, even the sizes of the facilities in some cases. Everybody would like to do more and has done a great job of maximizing what they've been able to do with the resources that are available. Next slide, please. Jill had a wonderful conversation around with the city around different factors that drive the number of visits to a location, because we know that all locations are heavily used. We also know that there's certain things that drive in-person attendance as opposed to something that's virtual. And one of the discoveries in our process is that things that drove visits, and of course there's limitations to that because of the size of some of the facilities, but program space is a thing that gets folks coming in the door. Also, the number of seats, the spaces available for use of technology that the library provides, and then also the size of the collection, the size of the physical collection that folks can check out and bring out with them. Next slide, please. The other thing we wanted to show you that sometimes we don't always think of this. Sometimes we think of every library doing exactly the same thing across a community. That's often not the case, especially one with the geographic spread of San Diego. And so the first one we wanted to point out is that when we look just in general, we don't want to get into specifics because there are a lot of things that influence this as well, including the size of the facility. But the ones you see highlighted in kind of that greenish color are the top locations for program attendance. The next category is PC use, and you can see that we have more of those kind of in that southern part of this section, the contiguous section of San Diego Public Library. And then finally, Jill, you're so good with the clicker. Materials circulation. These are the locations that circulated the highest numbers of things. And so the takeaway from this is to really have this idea of system thinking in terms of geography and use. Not every library does or should duplicate services exactly. They should be customized, and that's what we're seeing in this look at the data. Next slide, please. The other thing is talking about innovation during COVID-19. No one at the library was just sitting around doing nothing. There was so much happening in terms of the smooth transition from physical programs to virtual programs, including Comic-Con, book clubs, One Book San Diego, the How To Festival, and more. And look at this nice infographic. I love infographic. The one that got my attention first was right in the middle, where it said the number of library cards issued during COVID. That's amazing. That shows the how people went to looked to the library for help in this time when the community needs help. And there's lots to study and think about and ponder in this graphic. But if there was anything to show what a community player that the library has been during the pandemic, this is quite an example and something to think about, and certainly was it just blew us away when we saw it. And so we're going to, I guess, if there's any questions about high-performing library, we'd love to hear that. And if not, we'll move into the next section.
There are currently no questions.
Thank you so much, Raul. So this is kind of geeky, but we're going to talk about how we think about things when we are getting all this information in, because we need frameworks in which to understand all this information. And one thing that makes a lot of sense to us and to others that do this sort of work is thinking about the service channels, or how the library delivers services in different ways. And there's really three things that combine together to create the most power. And the first is the facilities. So these are all the things that happen inside a library building. I know not a lot has been happening inside a library building in the last year, but we know that that is coming back, and it was previously very important. It will be important again. These are things like our physical collections, our meeting spaces, our technology, our programs that happened on site. Then there is the things that happen outside of the library, and these are through the different outreach and non-site specific activities that the library is involved with. It's also library staff members. When library staff are out in the community and they're recognized as such, guess what? They get asked library questions. And so they're still performing that connection of people to all of the services that the library does. What we see around those both are our digital strategies. And it's very important to note that the digital strategies are not any more important than things that happen inside and outside. But technology is expensive. So what we want technology to do is to be able to help powerfully facilitate all the things that the library is doing either inside or outside. As well, we need to recognize that, and this was especially true during COVID, that there are some library services that are purely digital these days. So that's supposed to show us how we really want to do as much and leverage as much of our technology investment to support the entire efforts that the libraries make. Some of the lessons that were learned during COVID, again, the pivot that the library did was remarkable, and we saw that in the data that we looked at. These flexible, adaptive, and innovative staff, not only did they provide services, but one of the things that stood out to Jill and I in the focus group we did with staff is COVID created more of an imperative to communicate even strongly together, for staff communications to get better and more effective. This is a big deal because this is, most people only see the external things that happen. To make those things happen, you've got to really have it together internally. And so the first thing that staff did was they increased and improved the way that they were communicating with each other to stay in touch. This is significant during COVID. Of course, dramatic increase in digital service use. The library website, Wi-Fi was made available in some cases where it wasn't available before outside the buildings, on for longer periods of time and accessible to folks so that they had a place for Wi-Fi. As we know, there's necessities of life. There's food and shelter and Wi-Fi. So that was something that was very important. Also downloadable media, of course, different sorts of things that are available through the library, and then programs that were provided by library staff. Now, the challenge that we have from this, and this is all really, really good, but one of the lessons that we can see with COVID is what sort of new opportunities might come from this, and that is the growth of digital is likely to continue. Before COVID, people could take or leave digital sometimes. There was a certain amount of folks that just could take it or leave it. Now, almost everyone has the idea of what is possible with digital assistance, and that's going to certainly have an impact on the library in the future. The library also has a very solid technological base. We'll be showing you some graphs that came from the staff survey. And essentially, patron tech is in pretty good shape. So one of the questions we ask is, what words would you use to describe that? And useful, reliable, and high quality were at the top of the list. And the results asking staff to evaluate their own technology, the stuff that they use to serve patrons, was about the same. It was a similar sort of response, a very positive response. The other is the Wi-Fi system. Here we're seeing a little mix, and we should expect to see that. Now, predominantly, when you look at the graph, looking at the right side of the graph, that's showing a higher satisfaction as opposed to the left. There's a little bit more here in the middle saying, well, a lot of us think it's good, but almost as many of us think that there could be some improvements. This is part of a typical response for looking at Wi-Fi performance. And it's something to remember, right? Because I know this isn't super sexy when we're talking about technology. It's not very shiny, but infrastructure to deliver services, everything is dependent on wires. And wireless stuff, right? So this is one of the things that we wanted to check. And this is an area that San Diego's done a pretty good job of keeping up on, and we want them to continue doing a pretty good job. And it's a moving target and something to keep front of mind as we're going forward, especially with digital services. The technology devices that SDPL offers also, again, we see a nice a gathering of fairly high performance, but also some stuff right in the middle, looking at areas for improvement. And so this is for devices offered to patrons. The results were similar to staff tech. And what this showed me is that people were paying good attention to the sorts of things that they needed and the performance of those devices as well, because we all know that technology needs maintenance, it needs attention, it needs support, it needs experts to be able to help others using the technology. So this is a very good result and a reminder of how important it is to pay attention to this as we move forward. Looking at future technology, we asked staff about things that they would like to see in the future, and some of these things are things that do exist in parts of the library system. Others it doesn't. But in library technology, the physical things that people would come to the library to use, experience, came out highly on top, and this included things like a fax machine. Believe it or not, fax, if you don't know, is the service that just will not go away. Coast to coast, people want libraries to have fax machines because of different security concerns that they have with using email, different requirements, especially for healthcare sorts of things. It's still a viable service. Who would have thunk it? But that's something that staff also reported. Followed by mobile technology being very important, of course. These are making sure you're not tethered to a desk, but you can be in a lot of comfortable positions or elsewhere to be able to do this. Equity of access, thinking about the mobility and, we were talking about different branches have different points of service, different sorts of volume of use of different things. We want to keep equity at the top of things that we're thinking about, especially in terms of technology. That's on staff's minds. Streaming services, of course, that's one of the biggest things that is growing and something that we're grappling with. Wireless, of course, we want to make sure that's nice and healthy. New types of software for people to express their creativity was also cited. Learning, different learning opportunities for technology, computer classes, computer literacy, and digital literacy. And then, of course, taking the awesome Idea Labs and making that available in more places as appropriate. And finally, now this is really tiny. I know you can't see this, and we don't want you to look that closely at this because we haven't reported back all of the trends and findings, but we did a kind of a wacky online version of something that would have been fun to do in person, and we tried to have as much fun as we could when we did it online together. But the idea was to think of different zones in San Diego, and Jill will talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and recognize the fact that the library is a network of libraries. And so we asked staff the question, when we're thinking about these different areas, are there thoughts about what patrons desire in terms of technology access and devices, technology services, and technology learning and knowledge? And one of the things that we found throughout all of the areas is that just the continual idea of modernizing the technology and access to that technology is important. All zones faced with challenges to expand the infrastructure. The walls are difficult. There's no way to run wire. Our technology leader, Curtis, led that discussion because this is something that he sees every day, that he and his wonderful crew work to improve and to fight against because some of the buildings are difficult. And lots of creative approaches to retrofitting old buildings, which is, you got to have that creative approach to that. Also, staffing to support programming was also something that was talked about all over. Now, in different areas, like in the areas that you see there that say D, E, and G, and so that's in the lower part, the southern part, I should say, there's lots of transit riders, and so there's a lot of people that have a lot of dead time as they're getting between places. And so that's an opportunity, actually, to provide services to people who are not physically in a library location, but they're moving around a lot. When we look at areas B and D, there's a high concentration of military families, and they kind of come and go depending on their assignments and things like that. And they need things like video conferencing, access to e-collections to use while they're deployed. They need to communicate with loved ones who are in another place. And they also need a place for spaces for learning and certifications that they may not be able to get as easily on the base. Looking into some other areas too, especially towards the north, something that was cited was more services and more technology training opportunities for seniors because of the staff experiences there. And I think that is the end of this section. So before we move over to library facilities, any questions about the tech findings?
Yes, there was 2 questions related to data. The first question is from Eden. Is there a way to see how the top groups change if you add all 3 Claremont libraries together?
We could probably do a cross tabulation of that finding to see how that would change the results. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The second question is from Katie. Clarifying question regarding the demographic data. Will data be released and discussed to include the visualization of breakdown and number of responses from different zip codes and different languages in which the survey was completed?
I believe so, but Jill, I think you might be able to speak to that a little bit more eloquently.
That is one of the things we've been looking at in our analysis. We in fact, it shaped how the library and the foundation put their efforts into really encouraging more to participate. Planner Neha from Group 4 is here. She would create these maps of everywhere people were and weren't filling out the survey. And, so a lot of the last push was to get people in the particularly south parts of the city to participate. So yes, we can absolutely bring that forward and share whether there were differences or similarities in different parts of the city. Facilities. Almost half of the space in the library's network is housed in this big, beautiful building downtown. It's a wonderful landmark, and it does a lot of business. In 2019, our last full year of sort of pre-COVID statistics was 2019. So we spent a lot of time talking about 2019. 1 in 10 times anyone visited any library, it was to the Central Library, and more than a third of the entire physical collection, books, materials, DVDs, all that is housed in this building. And then we started looking at categories of branches by size and how they performed relative to each other. The bigger branches that you have, the ones that in the current, the 2000 master plan called for these bigger sort of landmark libraries of 20 to 25,000 square feet, I think. And so that's the level that we're looking at here. That's about a quarter of the space in the city. And it's doing higher than that proportion of visits, higher than that proportion of program attendance, right? Like these are your sort of top performing branches because they have more space. They have great space for programs. They have good balance of space for the collection and people and technology. So it makes a lot of sense. And they also, on a per square foot basis, tend to be less expensive to staff. If you think about how many staff you need at a building, oftentimes they can effectively operate and provide service in a bigger space than they actually have. Our medium category, the sort of neighborhood branch scale building that the current master plan called for, those are a little bit less than 15% of the overall space, but they're still, again, doing like more than their proportionate share of program attendance. And then you look at the small and tiny ones, right? And it's about a fifth of the space in the network, but they're housing almost a third of the whole physical collection, right? So Central Library has about a third. The tiny branches also have a third of the collection stuffed into them. They did half of all the computer PC sessions in 2019, lots of demand for that. And they are, opposite of the big libraries, right? They're the most expensive ones to operate. And that's not to say that they shouldn't, you want to close them down because they're too expensive. But the idea, again, is like, let's leverage those staff and provide more space around them for the things that those buildings simply can't do right now. More program space, all of those things. When we were with you in December 2019, we looked at space on a square foot per capita basis. That was a metric that we often use in library facilities master plan, simple ratio of how much library space there is relative to population size. The master plan from 2000 had recommendations by council district. So that was the way we looked at it at that time. And we said, you know, there's this wild disparity between council districts in terms of how much space there is, right? But we, as part of this process over the past year and a half, have had the opportunity to look at this and find that the council district boundaries aren't really how people use libraries. They visit libraries for different reasons and in different ways. One of the analysis we did was to take a sample of customer data, totally anonymous, don't know who they are, don't know what they checked out, but we do know where they lived, where they checked something out from. And when you start mapping those on top of each other, you get these patterns. This is too small to see, but you get this idea of how far people are willing to travel. Do they always go to the one closest to their home, or are they visiting one across town for this reason and that? So that we did find that the central library does provide citywide support. There's a little bit more frequency of actual visits as you get closer to downtown, but it still does have a citywide draw, and it's a very effective central library in that respect. We didn't see any parts of the city where people simply couldn't get to any libraries. There weren't any barriers or gaps. Everyone could get to a library. And Carson mentioned the zones. We did sort of find this zone pattern of use, and that's what has been shaping a lot of our analysis since then and a lot of our thinking about how the recommendations are going to look. This is my planner Neha and I went into the office and we plotted this map out on a giant piece of paper, and we had all kinds of fun drawing circles and figuring out where people go. But these 6 still lettered zones, because we haven't found better names for them, have been a big part of our work since then. So when we start thinking about things in terms of these zones, Carson had started talking about A, B, and D, and we again and again kind of see that A, B, and D are similar to each other in some ways, and C, E, and G are similar to each other in some ways. So the north and west parts of the community, more of the affluent neighborhoods, most of those bigger buildings, those bigger branches are in those areas. And those are the buildings that have more library visits, more circulation, more program attendance. You look at the other 3 zones and you start seeing very different patterns of use, very different communities. More of those tiny little branches that are working so hard and are so full of books and have such pressure on them to provide computer services and all kinds of things. Those tend to be in these parts of the city. So that's where we are. Square foot per capita. Looking at a citywide basis, if you take central library square feet and you put it over the entire population, you come out for about 0.26 square feet per capita. That's the effect that the central has on the system. You add in the branches citywide, you get about 0.32. Add those 2 together, and right now you have a current total of about 0.58 square feet per capita. What does that mean? It's a point, it's a data point. But when we start looking at the different zones, we start to see some of those inequities still, right? We've still got our D, A, and B, which are doing a little better than average on square foot per capita, and C and G, which are a little bit below. So even though the disparities aren't as grand as they looked back in December when we were looking by council districts, there's still a little bit of inequity in some of these communities in terms of access to library space. Now, this square foot per capita is our current point in time. As the population continues to grow over the next 10, 20 years, these numbers are going to change relative to the population. If you don't start adding more space, that square foot per capita is going to come down, and there is the issue of that disparity will continue to increase unless something is done. So how do we go about thinking about what the target might be, this 0.58 square feet per capita here? Carson mentioned that having program space for people to come in and do things, is a big part of what brings people to the library. So the first step we took was thinking about what would it look like if every library, every branch had a decent sized program room. So we, kind of ran those numbers and adjusted it, and found that it's at a system-wide level and per zone, you're not too far off from that, right? Like you could make that happen. The next step would be to add more space for people, particularly in those smaller libraries, right? If you wanted to add more space around this, we don't want to throw the books out, but what we want to do is provide more space in the library so people can sit and talk and work and, have the books there as well. And then, if we wanted to grow the collection more, right? The size of the current collection that San Diego has right now is shaped by the budget for materials acquisition and the amount of space you have to put books in. So, that's not the first reason we would talk about growing your buildings, but it's still a consideration for now and for the future. These targets we would recommend, because now we've seen how people move around and this is a pattern of use. These space targets would be applied per zone. As well as citywide. So not sort of the neighborhood specific, but taking advantage of the, people's patterns of use. Any questions on that before we move on?
There are a couple of questions
Okay.
Related to the survey. One of them is from Laura Dennison. Was your community survey divided into people who have always lived in San Diego versus those who have used a library in another city? What are the differences or comparisons?
I don't think we asked that question. We kept the demographic questions light. We wanted enough so we can get a sense of where people lived, and we had some race and ethnicity question, we had an age category question, but other than that, I think we really let it be very open and letting people share. We did ask people what libraries they used to use before COVID, but it wasn't which one is near to your house or what was your favorite. It was just a use question.
And then one more question, thank you, from Katie. What is the percentage program participation for tiny, small libraries?
Percentage program participation.
I think this one, there was a data point mentioned somewhere about program participation, and I don't know if it's broken out by size. There we go, small and tiny libraries.
Right. So we had 40% in the big branches, we had 20% in the mediums. And so what does that leave us left over? 40% for the small and tiny libraries? Like that's a lot. Again, it's that sort of disproportionate working really, really hard. And part of the question is, if you don't have a program room, where are you offering these programs? But often in small buildings, you just have the program right there in the middle, out in the open. I hope I answered that question. Okay, so out of all this analysis, all of our work with the library staff team and the steering committee and our wonderful core project group, we developed this framework for thinking about what the future of the San Diego Public Library network would look like. Not just the facilities, but generally that library of the future idea. And the 4 concepts that are shaping that vision are equity and engaging in experience, having libraries everywhere, like Carson mentioned, and then having a library that's very empowered and high performing. Break this down on equity, having a library that really does serve all of the diverse community. Everyone, all the groups that we went and talked to in the focus groups, everyone who needs something and wants something for the library, they should be able to find it there. Back to that idea of providing space equitably in each zone, correcting that and letting there be plenty of space in each zone for all the services that people need. And Carson mentioned this earlier, but not a one-size-fits-all vision for what's available in each branch, but really tailoring that to what the people who use that branch need and want. Having libraries that are inviting, appealing, and attractive. The newer branches in your system are lovely and wonderful. I haven't had a chance to walk through many of them. I'm sure most of them are lovely. But walking into a library is really a wonderful experience, particularly if it's your first time in there, and having people feel like this is great, I want to keep coming back here, is a big part of why people go to libraries. Having buildings that are well maintained, safe and accessible, roofs don't leak, sidewalks you can roll a wheelchair or a walker up on them. All of those things are part of this too. And then that idea of adaptability for the future, something that can change as the community changes over time, as their needs change. Resilient, particularly because of COVID, things got closed and it became complicated to open them. So having that infrastructure there and then being ready for the future, whatever it comes, technology. It'll be fun to see what libraries evolve into in San Diego. Library everywhere, that diagram of there's digital, like wherever you are, you can get access to the library. With robust services, great partnerships and outreach strategies too, like helping the library step outside of the walls of its own buildings and leverage community spaces as well to bring services closer to customers. And then empowered and high performing. Back to the idea of staff having the training and the time and the resources to deliver all of the services they want to provide, have the impact they want to provide. And there's a building element of that too, having the buildings be very easy to operate. So staff aren't doing mostly transactional tasks, but really are spending as much time as possible with customers, and making sure that the library has enough resources to provide service and access as well. So that is the emerging vision for the library. I saw a hand up at least.
Yes, there's a hand up from Claudia. Would you like to take the question now?
Sure.
Hi, Claudia. Please state your question. Okay, I think she may have lowered her hand.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's good to see you again, Claudia. All right, we have another raised hand.
Yes, we have another raised hand. Just disappeared on me. I think the hand was lowered again. And Judith has a question. Hi, Judith. Please ask your question. Okay, the hand was lowered.
Hey, I'm here. I'm sorry, but my computer did something strange. So I just wanted to compliment the consultants on this wonderful survey that they have completed, or draft at this point, I presume. I worked in the San Diego public system in the 1970s in several branches, and then worked from 1986 till retirement in 2001 for the Sarah Cooperative Library System. So I was in one of the basements of the old Central Library. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments. There has been, as you pointed out, a dramatic increase in digital service use. And I think that, like you said, that will continue. It's essential for remote access as much as in library access. And I think classes for those who, and this may already exist, for those who are less familiar with or are comfortable with digital access is important as well. I remember all too well in the 80s and 90s when SDPL was trying to make the transition to digital and to a I guess you could call it a digital catalog as well. And it was a terrible struggle because staff was not, they were either provided minimal training or no training at all. So it was on the fly. They had to figure out how to deal with it. I think the current city librarian and staff at all levels are doing a wonderful job. So I'll add that to your survey.
Nice.
And oh, and I just wanted to express my great pleasure in seeing 2 floors of remote storage at the old Central Library, mostly brought out onto the public shelves. Because I loved having that access to the shelves. I think it's essential for library users to be able to browse the shelves as they can now. And I just really want to compliment everybody within the San Diego Public Library system on what they've accomplished in recent years, and particularly during COVID. I have used the ability to request books intensively over the last 14, 15 months. And I think it's been essential for a lot of people. I certainly see the hold books, huge lines of hold books in the meeting space at my branch, where people were able to come in and get them either at the front door and then gradually into the meeting space. And now they've actually moved into an area within the main room for the
Thank
whole.
you, Judy.
Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I will say we have 27 minutes left for the presentation. We have one more question. Would you like to continue with the presentation and take all the rest of the questions at the
Yep.
end? Okay,
We're almost done.
thank you.
So that's where we are. That was our sort of trying to boil down 18 months of study into some, this meeting. So thank you for being patient with us as we're trying to work through that. What's next for us is we really want to hear from more of the community and bringing some of these ideas and this story and these principles out to the community, see what they think. Does it resonate? Does it feel like they can see themselves in it and see the future of the library and their community in that? So working through what we can go hopefully do in person in San Diego. I feel like I'm at the limit of what I am ready to do through digital strategies. This is totally enjoyable, but the idea of trying to do 7,000 more of those in a digital format makes me tired. Looking forward to being able to meet people in person and talk with them.
Yes. Yes.
We will. We did an update for the Community Planners Committee, and we'll do another one of those in the coming months. Doing a presentation for the Public Safety and Livable Neighborhoods Committee to update them. And then once we have an idea that we're on the right track and we've got some good community feedback on it, we'll start writing it up, publish it for public review and stakeholder review as well. And then we'll be done. But schedule's still to be determined, a little bit based on when we can start getting that community engagement. Okay. Hopefully, we still have 24 minutes left.
Before we jump into any other questions or comments, fascinating, absolutely incredible and comprehensive presentation. I know that's just the preliminary plan findings and framework, but really a huge thank you, Carson and Jill and your team. There was a lot of information from many, many people. And at one point I was loving your graph that looked a little bit like the old school Etch-a-Sketch. I'm like, oh my gosh. So thank you. What I just love about it, and I was just taking copious notes because I'm so excited, is it really did confirm a lot of the things that we've been hearing from the community. I mean, these issues of equity, and we can just talk to our friend Claudia to know, right? But how libraries are used differently. And so I just really, again, want to thank you for that really wonderful first presentation about what we found so far. And thank you everyone for joining. In the interest of time, so I give everyone an opportunity, if anyone has any other questions or comments, if we can just keep them to a minute, but I do want to make sure, and thank you, Raul, for doing such a great job moderating. If we have any other questions or comments, you can do them now in the chat or raise your hand, but this is, like, I had to find another piece of paper. I was taking so many notes, and I know my partners were like, yes, this is what we know. And then, you know, North County usage is different from South County usage, and how do we get, you know, everything distributed more equitably and equally. And so just absolutely fantastic. I mean, you would think that you would have been with us for 20 years with all of that information. So excellent job to your team, Carson and Jill. Absolutely fantastic, and really, really great questions. So I'll throw it back to Raul to ask for questions or comments from the attendees or commissioners.
Absolutely. We have a question in the chat and a raised hand. We're going to go with the question in the chat first. With greater emphasis on climate change in San Diego and the city realizing the need for convenient mass transit, did you survey the libraries on how people come to the library? For example, bus, car, or skateboard?
That's a really good question. Part of the data analysis, we didn't ask that direct question. We didn't ask about transportation, but as you could see in one of the questions that we shared, that transportation issues, including walking, skateboard, streets, public transportation, auto transportation, came up as a theme, a very strong theme in terms of things that you would change if you could change something about. So of course, the majority of those comments are not how awesome it is to do transportation in San Diego, but it's about the challenges that each face. So while the question was not answered or asked directly, that emerged as a very important topic, and there's lots of, and that was an open-ended question, lots of excellent data that we're in the process of classifying so that it's easy to review and see some of the challenges that people have with transportation in the community.
Thank you. We have a question from Jane. Please state your question. Okay, we will come back. We have a question from Claudia. Hi, Claudia. Please state your question. And I'm going to ask you to unmute. You should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. It's nice to be here today with everyone, and thank you so much for all the work that you've done on this project. A couple of things I'm thinking about, I'm sure as everyone else is, but I'll ask just one question for today. I was interested in the high use libraries that you talked about. I think you identified 5. And I wondered, what are the features that you found of the highest use libraries? I mean, was it resources, location, finances? And is the goal to increase the use of other libraries based on the survey comparable to these high use libraries?
Good question. I don't think we looked at resources specifically, but I'll have to go back and look at it. We have this giant data set with multiple tabs and stuff, so I'll need to go back and look at that. And we did look at the cost of operating branches. The things that had the highest correlation with use in the statistics that we looked at were, did a branch have a program room? You know, did it have a lot of technology, and did it have, you know, a big collection? And those were, you know, those 3 things aren't necessarily universally needed in all communities, but those together are a library that has enough space for many people to find things in it. One of the things we find about bigger libraries is that they offer more opportunities for families to come together, where there's something for everyone. There's bigger space for programs and more diverse programs, you know, more technology, more flexible technology. Yeah, I don't know, Carson, what am I? I'm wandering off.
Yeah, no, you're
Claudia's question.
doing fine. And this is the natural thing that happens anytime that because again, it's so hard sometimes to find the themes within data, because whenever we present something, it brings up more questions like this. And so sometimes the answer was it was easily at hand. So I love the transportation, because I was actually just looking at that this morning. So it was very fresh in the mind. So there might be some more questions. If we're not able to answer those readily, like in this moment, we can certainly take a look afterwards. And I think that's what we should do, because the other problem with making sure that we answer the question correctly is we want to make sure we're looking at the correct data to answer that question. And as Jill said, we have several different pots of lots and lots of data. So perhaps we could do that approach for anything that we're unable to answer easily today.
Thank you, Carson.
That gave me a minute, Carson. Thank you, to come back around to where I started going. We had a really wonderful conversation with our library staff team at one of our first meetings with them about what a high-performing library means, and trying to take apart this idea that all libraries are doing the exact same things, and if they offer the exact same things, they should all be used in the same way. Is a high rate of circulation, is that a high-performing library? Is something else? And everyone said, well, it depends, right? Like, it depends on what the community needs. But the one thing that everyone agreed was a mark of a high-performing library was the number of people that walk in the door. Whatever they're walking in the door for, they're meeting that community's needs. So the door count is one of those things to watch. It's tempting to look at libraries which have a lower visit count and call them low performing. But part of our job in this process is to say, well, that building either isn't big enough, or it isn't providing the right, resources or space for what that particular community wants. So to your question, Claudia, I think the goal is, yes, like all of the libraries should have a high visit count. Ideally, but it's a matter of finding what those communities want, and we'll draw them in.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to just update. We have 17 minutes left. We have 4 questions.
Great.
Go ahead, Carson, and I'll take the question right after your comment.
Oh, you're very kind. I was just going to say that the other limitation, of course, is a physical space can only fit so many things, right? And so choices have been made, wonderful choices in terms of service delivery as well. But as Jill said, it's very hard to find that metric that applies universally, because it's so individual to those needs and to the actual capacity of the library in that area to serve. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. I'm going back to Jean now. Jean, please state your question.
Thanks. You finally got me unmuted. 2 points. One, I think it's just a follow-up on things that have already been said. It was very interesting to see the different usages, but I wanted to make sure that you were also correlating that with what facilities are available. Obviously, libraries with no program space are not likely to have as much program use as ones that do have, large meeting rooms. And
Yes.
It was also clear that you did a lot of analysis on the response from your staff surveys, but that there's still a lot you're working on with the surveys from the general public in your focus groups. And I was wondering when those next results will be available.
The focus group analysis is still in progress. I think they just finished up the last groups sometime in the last 2 weeks. So they're taking all of that 15 focus groups worth of data and boiling it down into big themes and ideas. We got some introductory ones here earlier. The community survey, honestly, the response we got was magnitudes higher than what I would have expected in any other community. Yes. We often with library surveys like this, we'll get 1,000, 2,000 responses, and that's a manageable number for asking questions like, what do you love about your community? we got 7,500 responses of what people love about their community and a whole host of other questions. It's really taking us a while. We are leveraging some AI technology to start boiling things down into big pots, but then it's just going through. I think we're hoping to get the big themes taken out of that in the next month.
Yeah, I think that's right. And as Jill said, something to note about AI, artificial intelligence, is it can only be as intelligent as we teach it. And so that's part of one of the iterative processes. As a sidebar, when you're doing AI analysis of so much subjective information, which are those open-ended questions, which are awesome for people because they don't have to be locked into any set answers, is to go through and actually test and review that. And that's all manual work. That's many people looking at that to make sure that this is accurate and actionable data. So we're having a lot of success with that and a lot of fun. And it's like teaching a kid something in a way.
Thank you. Another question in the chat from Isabel. Will the presentation or data be made available?
Yes. Does someone from the foundation, I think Charlie or Patrick, you were talking about when it might be shared and where?
Yeah, we intend to have the presentation for this recording will be available on supportmylibrary.org/masterplan within the next couple of days. And then as updated iterations of the analysis become available, we will also make those available. And then, as Jill had mentioned, once we get to the point that we have a finalized draft that's ready for further public comment, that of course will be a great opportunity for the public to review in greater detail and comment on not only the process but the findings themselves. So yes, we are going to make this as available as possible to everyone that we can.
Thank you. There was, I see that Elida had her hand up and her hand is down now. Maybe her question was answered. We'll go to Katie next. Katie, go ahead and please state your question.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Perfect. So my question kind of builds off of Jean's point that she made in regards to there being a correlation between different usage based in different areas. Some libraries don't have the same resources as others. As someone in Zone E with a tiny library, concerned about kind of the open-ended interpretation of what our library needs, since we couldn't report on some of the other factors, right? Like there's limits on what size-wise we can accommodate at our library. I'm wondering if there will be any sort of weighted factor for the areas that have lower responses, as you mentioned in the southern regions. Because we're a working class area, we don't necessarily have the time or ability to engage, and despite our best efforts to rally the troops to answer. So we want to make sure that we're heard, and that as a group, we want to make sure that it's equity, right? So
Yes.
That's one thing that I'm really concerned about. Also, this is really exciting. We've been waited on bated breath for these results, so it's really fun to see all this data visualization, and it's really great to see how it's all being interpreted in so many different ways at different levels based on both the responses and the focus group. So thank you.
All right. Was somebody going to make a comment on Katie's?
Yes, sorry, I thought I was muted and I wasn't. I had a moment. Katie, thank you. Oak Park is one of the few branches I've had the chance to visit before everything got locked down. So I've seen it. I know what it's like. Our analysis of what the branches were doing in 2019 is about, at a system level, trying to correlate factors that affect the library's ability to provide service. We're not going to publish a ranking where one is at the top and other at the bottom. That's not our purpose. The slide that Carson presented in particular, like it was just sort of, these are the ones that are doing the top 5, but you know, we're not looking at the bottom 5 and casting aspersions on anybody. The point you raised about equity of resources is one that I think is something that there's an opportunity to think differently about how resources are shared and with whom and why. There are libraries in the country, Dayton Metro is one of them, where they specifically put more resources toward the parts of the community with the greatest needs and the biggest digital divide and the biggest equity gaps. So that is one thing. That recommendation is a little bit beyond what we're doing here in this study, but it's certainly, there's the opportunity to think that way in the San Diego system.
That was also the purpose behind the staff looking at specifically in terms of technology and digital equity as well, because we know that there might be limitations and realities as far as increasing the physical size. We also know that there's limitations, of course, with access and people having the devices, for instance, and the connectivity to get it. But that was something that we were trying to probe in that area, that realm, to make sure that we were thinking as widely as we could on how to serve people in any way we could going forward.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back with Elida. Please state your question. Okay. We'll go on to the next one. We have 8 minutes left. If there,
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, my computer's going crazy over here. I was listening on my phone, and then I was able to get on my computer. This has been an exciting time and an excellent presentation. And thank you all at the city library staff and our communities at large, and specifically all of our residents and community friends of the library from Oak Park. I am in District 4, and I was one of the persons who did the focus group for the Spanish survey. And did I miss something, or we don't have anything yet from those responses from Spanish speakers, or where are we with that?
That analysis is still in progress.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's another question in the chat here. Is there data by library or area about number of responses to the survey?
One of the demographic questions we asked people was for their zip code, and they weren't required to put it in, but most people did. So we do have the ability to tie community survey responses to individual zip codes. That's how many zip codes do you have in San Diego? Like 30 or 40. So what we have been doing is grouping them together by our zones that we have been using for other things, and that is part of what we're looking at as well, but no big highlights yet.
Do you want to clarify too, Jill, very quickly, that one of the questions that was asked wasn't necessarily what is the branch in your neighborhood, but what is the branch that you use?
Right.
I had asked, I don't know who asked that question. I asked the same question when we met last week. And so it was more importantly that the question to be understood is what is your favorite branch, or what is the branch that you use most often, versus what is the branch perhaps closest to your house or in your zip code, that kind of thing. So beginning to think about where branches or why branches are being used and how they're being used versus just the branch next door.
Right.
Very well, thank you. I see one more hand up here. Isabel. Hi, Isabel. Please go ahead and state your question and unmute.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for all this hard work that everybody's done. I really appreciate the data. I'm wondering, once you have all this data, what are some of the possible recommendations? At one point you talked about, you said those 3 different things. If we added space, if we added collection, if we added programs, what what are the options for that? You know, how do you add, how would you figure out how to add space? Are we talking about building new buildings? Are we talking about renovating current buildings? You know, what are those options there that might come from the conclusion that a community needs more space?
Very good question. The recommendations are going to, at a high level, say this is the amount of space that we recommend at a minimum should be provided in each of these zones. It should, and then that minimum target is based on our analysis of what it would take to what you have now. If you added enough program space per zone to have a good meeting room at every library, you added space in each zone to have a more of a well-balanced feel, particularly in your small and tiny libraries, and then you know, what you might want to be able to grow the collection beyond what it is now. We are not getting to the specifics of what should happen at each facility. That is the next stage of master planning. You know, does Oak Park get expanded or replaced? Does Ocean Beach get renovated or expanded, or you know, whatever it is? That's the next stage, looking at those opportunities. What this part of the plan will say is, do your best not to get to your space planning target by just adding a bunch more tiny libraries. Like, don't get there by adding more ocean beaches. Like, do it by where you have the opportunity to replace some of your smaller ones with bigger ones, that your staff can operate more efficiently. They have more of those resources. They have a better blend of things, and you'll start seeing those higher levels of use that right now are constrained because you don't have the space.
Thank you, Jill. And I think what I'll add to that on the city side is that we're going to take all of these recommendations, and as updates to certain facilities come up and they are in line for whatever work they have, any type of maintenance or repairs or you know, additions, etc., this is going to be used as a guiding document to figure out what the needs will be into the future. So definitely working hand in hand with the planning department as well. So it's a city, it's going to be incorporated into the city's master plan update. I know the time is now 1:58. We have a couple minutes. I know that we need to adjourn at 2 p.m. So with that, I will turn it back over to Wendy.
Yes. Thank you so much, Raul, for moderating. Thank you, everyone, for joining. You can just tell the excitement in the meeting about the preliminary findings. And so just a friendly reminder that a video of this meeting will be posted on the city's YouTube channel. You can also visit the foundation's website, supportmylibrary.org master plan, to make any additional comments. And again, this is just the preliminary findings and the framework. So there will be more to come, more opportunities to make comments. And again, just really wanted to acknowledge and thank Carson and Jill and the whole team from Group 4, to everyone that helped serve on the committee with input, to everyone that filled out the survey, and to everyone for joining us today. I would like to wrap that up, and just quickly, is there any other business or commissioner comments before we adjourn for today? Okay. If not, I wish you all well. Round of applause, please. Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. And really, I appreciate the thoughtful comments and questions. We absolutely love our library. So wishing everyone a great afternoon, and the meeting I will adjourn with maybe 9 seconds left. Have a great afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.